Good day, world. Welcome to Be in the Moment. Today, we have a very timely topic of central bank digital currencies. So, when was the first time that you ever heard of a central bank? Can you still remember that? Today, we will talk with Brittany Bitts and Jerry David Chan about the good, the bad, and the ugly with CBDCs. So, welcome to Be in the Moment.
Yeah, that's
Hello.
hello. I'm Rory. It's good to be here. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Brittany. Yes. So I was thinking, there's a lot of news about CBDC, and it's a super hot topic. Uh, Last week, when we met for the conversation with Jerry uh, about privacy and transparency, I was really into the CBDC topic because I had just been on the N-Chain town hall where the Simit, the CEO, had welcomed everyone to ask questions. And he said that the solution that Nchain offers for CBDCs is enabling both transparency and privacy. So I felt, this is good integrity, and I feel enthusiastic to support it. But then, as I ponder further, I'm remembering the history of central banking. And I'm calling to mind the forefathers like Andrew Jackson and also Adam Smith, and trying to keep an open mind. So I know, Brittany, you have a background more in the libertarianism, we could say. So, can you remember when you first heard about a central bank?
Central banks, just in general, or like calling them specifically centralized banks, because there was a point in time where everybody knew what the banking system did, but we weren't directly referring to it as a central bank. So I suppose the first time that I heard those terms, centralization, decentralization, that sort of thing, was probably back in 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And yeah, it's I guess it's got a lot of different viewpoints on it. Just depends on kind of where what your background is and how you come to view decentralization versus centralization and centralized banks. Most people have a very negative opinion on the term centralized banking.
Right. Okay. So I'll tell you, I remember I was at one of those bookshop music stores, and I was probably a sophomore or a junior in high school. And I was browsing through the political book section. And this redheaded hippie that I went to school with passed by me in the bookcases and said, "End the Fed. We need to end the Fed." And I didn't know what he was talking about. And I said,
Taxation is
"The
theft.
Fed." I thought, what's the Fed? Like it sounded risky, was my first impression. And I thought, what is he talking about? And the Fed. And that was the first impression I ever had of that concept. And then years later, I went to university. And a part of my degree, I focused on economics and political science in school. And we took the basic 1101 microeconomics, and we took 1102 macroeconomics. And I have always had a bit of low confidence in terms of math. So when we were talking about monetary policy, I wanted to take very careful notes. And I said, "Ooh, teacher, teacher, how do they set the monetary policy? What equation do they use?" And the professor said, "They don't have one. They just make it up." And I thought, wow, they just make it up. So these were big impressions in my life over the years in terms of awareness of the Fed or the Federal Reserve. Later, I did go to an event at the Federal Reserve building in Atlanta. And I met a lot of the people there and took the tour. And they even locked me in the bank robber's door for about 30 because I walked in through the outdoor or out through the indoor, whatever it was. So I know they have very high security there, but uh, I am open minded. So even though uh, I want to discover the big picture from everyone and take the best from everywhere, I also want to do so with genuine integrity.
Mm.
So while I'm a huge cheerleader for nChain and I adore them and I think that they have the utmost integrity, I want to also be sober in looking at this topic and to hold true to the legacy of Andrew Jackson and other forefathers. So that's where I'm going with that today.
Yeah. Well, I definitely understand where you're coming from with hearing people say in the Fed and whatnot. Like you said, I do have a little bit of a libertarian viewpoint on that. And like I said, taxation is theft. But aside from all of that, going back to like the in-chain thing, I think what they're trying to accomplish is, BSB, as we spoke about in the last video, encourages everyone, including the government, to inherently be more honest. So if the government were to adopt BSV as a means of transportation to allow a CBDC currency, right? If they use BSV as that transportational vehicle for CBDCs, I think it would force them to be inherently more honest due to the very nature of BSV. The problem that I see or foresee with all of this is that, as we know, the government is very, they like to be in control of things. And so I don't know. I mean, you've got a lot of people in the broader crypto space like XRP and all of these other cryptos, and they're talking about, oh, well, this is going to be adopted by the banking systems and it's already happening and yada, yada, yada. I just personally don't see a case scenario where the US government comes in and says, yes, let's utilize this technology for CBDCs. My understanding of them, or my opinion of them, would be that they'd want to create their own system so that they could be in more control of it. Now, I know a lot of people in the BSB space will be like, well, it's transparent and it's auditable and this and that and the other thing. They'll start naming off a fluid list of reasons as to why BSB is the answer and why they should use this, and I agree with those. But at the same time, I'm like, the government isn't going to utilize this system, in my opinion, because they're not going to have control over it. And moreover, why would a government use a system that forces them to be transparent and honest when we know them to historically not be transparent and honest? And so I guess those would be the things that I would input there.
Yes, I hear ya for sure. And that was something that I was thinking about too with the Federal Reserve. It is secret. So we don't know who necessarily the shareholders are. Uh, the Federal Reserve, or the system, it has never been audited. So that was something I heard recently, like another call to action was audit the Fed. So I think like a CBDC, as you mentioned, that was on a transparent system such as the BSV Bitcoin protocol, that would enable transparency. So that from an idealist perspective, being, looking for the ideal and being optimistic, we could say, yes, this is a great solution to bring that transparency. But then when we turn to the realist perspective, like you say, what kind of, folks in power are going to want that?
I
Want
think
to
it's
show the books,
I
right?
think there's another thing here too that a lot of people don't realize is, even though we call it the Federal Reserve, it doesn't actually have anything to do with the federal government. And
Right.
so, there's a lot of misconceptions there. And I mean, even if the government were to go in and audit the feds, right? as we've seen recently with the auditing of the Pentagon, they failed multiple years in a row now, but nothing is being done about the Pentagon failing these audits. So even if the government were to go into the reserve, audit them, and find something, questionable, or they fail
Mm-hmm.
the audit or whatever, are they really going to do anything about it? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And to that, I always say, keep moving forward. So, like they would say, what is that? The not, what is that movement? I guess, is it the progressive movement? The, oh, what is that? From the group, the Franklin clique or something? Over time, over hundreds of years, they came in to kind of water down our systems of value through education, through the media, and it was a kind of clique. Gosh, what are they called? Well, I'll have to look it up. But basically, I think we could say, oh, these bad guys trying to wither away our freedoms, our, essential freedoms as individuals in, let's say, the United States of America, for sure, if not other places in the world. This slow, insidious drip towards oppression or towards compliance, towards being under some authoritarian rule. Just as that can be the slippery slope, I think our perseverance can also be just as slippery. So even if we say nothing happens, look, we have all the facts. Let's still keep getting the facts. So that's my optimism, right? I'm saying, hey, even if it's nothing, we haven't seen anything done yet about this audit of the Pentagon, at least we have the receipts. We've got the facts out, right? And actually, I've never heard of that, Brittany. So you just mentioning it is a slippery step. Next. So where can people find out more about the audit of the Pentagon?
I would just Google search it. It showed up on I want to say sometime last week, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
It showed up on multiple different news websites. Um, I want to say something was written by the Washington Post, but I can't quite remember. I take in so much information on a daily basis that I can't remember exactly where it's at. But I'm sure if you just Google search, Pentagon audit or something like that, you can find more information about it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I will. And one thing that I did want to bring up today was about Andrew Jackson. Do you know anything about Andrew Jackson?
The seventh president.
He's quite, if you look at his history, he's quite legendary. Okay. So there were a lot of things that were negative that were attributed to him as well as positive. So the big thing about Andrew Jackson is he abolished the national bank that that Hamilton was so big on. Alexander, right? Alexander Hamilton was the big proponent of saying we need a national bank. And he said, oh, in the Constitution, it's implying that we can do this. And then Andrew Jackson came up and said, no, it's not. Where does it say it specifically? If it doesn't, it's not included. So he abolished it. And then the reasons that he abolished it were that the shareholders were foreigners and that they were charging debt to the American people to issue their currency. And so we see that banks, they offer a lot of great services, right? They're not all terrible, but they also, in this sense of the national bank, they were charging interest. Foreigners were charging interest to the American people for basically just using paper money. So he said that is unconstitutional and he abolished it. And so all these years later, the fact that his face is used on a Federal Reserve note is a kind of abomination against his history, his legacy. So every time, you see the 20, You just think, wow, they put his face on the paper money that later, came out through the Federal Reserve banking system. So I like to always speak up for Andrew Jackson to say, let us remember, never forget his legacy and what he did. And I'd say also, like George Washington and even Abraham Lincoln. And then I don't have any Benjamins on me right now, but Benjamin Franklin, like these faces, these are legendary faces that we love, right? We admire. They're people of integrity, our forefathers, and their faces are used to legitimize this institution. And they might not necessarily have been in favor of a type of overarching bank, such as a Federal Reserve Bank. So I think some of these areas are room for improvement in terms of our currency moving forward, to really remember who's who. Also, we can look to Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. So if we turn to chapter 2, he has a particular section on the money supply. So this is something that I'm using as standards for making decisions on this topic. Yes. So what do you think of that, Brittany?
Yeah, it's kind of like a slap in the face. I did not know that specifically about Andrew Jackson, so that's
Oh
thank you for
no,
teaching me something. Yeah,
I'm
it's all
sorry.
right.
See, you teach me something and I teach you something. Like that's what conversation is all about. But at the same time, we have greater opportunity than ever before in history. People, we have wonderful life, really, everywhere. Conditions and lifestyle is better than ever before. So I'm not saying to be pro anarchy and let's, stick it to the man. But I am saying, you know, maybe we can look at these big authority figures and say it's okay for us to innovate, be a little avant-garde.
I've heard some people say before that I thought was pretty poignant that people who are too far right, if you go too far right, politically speaking, what you end up getting is anarchy. And if you go too far left, what you end up getting is socialism. And so there has to be like a medium in the middle where everybody meets to kind of find that even ground with each other. And yeah.
So true. Yeah, I second that notion for sure. Yes.
Did we hear anything back from Jerry
Nothing
yet?
from Jerry. Jerry is MIA totally. And he has the background working at Goldman Sachs and
He would
everything
have a
like that.
great input. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, we can just hope for the best and invite him another time. But I thank you for your time today. And is there anything from central bank digital currencies that you've heard in the news that you'd like to make us aware of?
More on the CFI DeFi thing, because like I said, I know they are pushing for DeFi right now. What type of regulatory compliances are going to come out, I don't know. I know that when I had a conversation with Patrick Thompson was saying a lot of the laws and regulations that are already out there kind of have the wording necessary to kind of go after anything right now that may be illegal, so to speak. And so the laws are already there for all these crypto things to comply with. Um, so as far as more regulation, I don't know, and whether or not I believe the U.S. government would come out and back something like, XRP or BSV, even with its transparency and all of these other things. I'm inclined to believe that they wouldn't. I'm inclined to believe that they'd want to create their own system. I know there's a lot of people that have a differing opinion on that. And I'm just going to say from my own personal thought space. I don't think that they would go for that. I think they'd want their own thing. And as far as more regulatory compliance right now, let's say that they did create their own thing. They would not want to be creating more laws or writing new regulations right now, um, for the crypto space to comply with, when most of their laws are already kind of covering the broad space or the broad strokes that could they could take these companies to court if need be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would they want to create more compliance right now if they have the option of creating their own CBDC currency? And if they created more compliance right now, they'd be kind of shooting themselves in the foot, proverbially speaking, because if they do try to implement their own, they're going to be beholden to whatever new laws and regulations that they come out um, on with their own CBDC currencies. So it's in my opinion at the moment that they'd create their own system, wait off on creating any new laws or regulation, and just kind of like bait their time, see if this whole stuff blows over, prosecute to the fullest extent of the current laws, get their own CBDC currency out there, and then once they've established what type of rules and regulations they want surrounding this new currency or yada yada yada, then they could come in and say, okay, these are the new rules, and these are the rules that we're okay with, so these are the rules that we're going to enforce. You know, whether that's true or not, whether that's what's actually going to happen, I couldn't say. It's just something that's, I guess, in my own opinion right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily that you would want that, it's that you could see that happening as most likely. Is that
It
right?
seems the most probable, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Okay, right. And definitely, let's touch on the SBF. But first, I do want to bring up something Nightmare K-Hawk told me just the other day. In Australia, they have said if you don't have a good social credit score, then you cannot buy Bitcoin.
Interesting. What's a social credit score?
It's something to do with whether you are an upright citizen or not. They keep tabs on. I don't know exactly what's involved in the social credit score in Australia, but this is a big wake up call for me because I had thought, oh, maybe it's just something that they're doing in China, but it seems that no, actually, they're doing it in Australia too. So it's spreading. It's that slippery slope. So that's something to look out for. And that's what a lot of these people that are anti CBDC say is that the government wants to or intends to tie in your social credit score with your ability to make purchases.
Yeah. And see, that actually gives a little bit more credit to my theory here of what could happen, because if the government fully controls the system of CBDC currency inside and out, and they create their own laws to regulate themselves, um, then yeah, they can distribute CBDC currencies to everybody, and then not even just based off your social credit scores. It could be, well, you need to put your passports on the blockchain associated with your CBDC account, and your vaccines or whatever information they deemed appropriate and necessary, you would have to upload to your account. And if you didn't, then they'd be like, okay, we're going to lock you out of your funds. You're not going to be able to access any of this information. And like you said, with the social credit scores and whatnot, they could just decide, hey, we found out through these, programs and AI and this, that, and the other, that you've been directly in contact with somebody with COVID-19 or something like that, right? And then all of a sudden they say, okay, you're not allowed to leave the house anymore. So we're going to turn off your electric vehicle, because that's the future, is everybody driving electric vehicles, with them doing away with V8 engines and everything else. They're pushing for more EV vehicles. Why? It's not just about environmental concerns, when the
A lot of
lithium that they're pulling out of the ground is more harmful to the environment and to to the people
Yeah.
actually working those mines than just
Toxic.
burning gas.
Seriously, I
Um,
know.
so yeah, 10 years from now, with the big push for EV vehicles and them coming out with more and more EV options and doing away with the classics, the Camaro, the Challenger, these V8 engines, getting rid of those and pushing towards those EV vehicles, everybody having a CBDC account and maybe a social credit score, you can see the tyranny that potentially could take place. Okay, you've been in contact with somebody, we're going to turn off your EV vehicle. And if you don't stay home, we're going to lower your social credit score. And if we lower your social credit score, then you're not going to have access to your account until you up your social credit score or until you comply with these demands, right? I mean, it's all just theories. It's all just hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
It's tinfoil hat discussions, but it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting how it all kind of commingles, especially over the last few years with people being regarded as conspiracy theorists, and then a lot of these things turning out to be true.
Right. I know. Yeah, it is something to take a sober look at, 110% for sure. And that's why, we could see that dystopian option, or we could also see a more positive option, optimistic, like maybe having these alternatives will lead to innovation where we then will get to the Back to the Future cars that are run on garbage. Maybe that's possible. Why not? Let's try it. But there is this, like you said, a balance that we need when we're looking at this and planning for the future. So next is that hot topic of what is his name? SBF.
Sam
He's
Bankman
that
Fried.
mystery geek who showed up out of nowhere and is funding all these people and a big Ponzi schemer, and everybody's associating him with crypto and Bitcoin. But really, he's just the same old fraudster as ever before, right?
Yeah, and I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes. And in terms of the broader crypto space, I think it really has set them back a while in terms of like new adoption. People are going to anybody coming into the space now. When you've got non-crypto related people all of a sudden talking about SBX and or SBF, I'm sorry, and everything going on,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden, you start realizing, well, all these people could have been potential adopters of the broader crypto space and say the next bull cycle, right? Um, and now all of a sudden they're like, well, maybe we should be a little bit more cautious of this crypto stuff. If they were on the fence about it before, they're probably erring to the side of safety at this point. And so, in those
Mhm.
terms, I think that this whole debacle has really set back the crypto space, be it good or bad. That's not for me to judge, right? Um, but all I really want to say about it is, you know, I feel for all the people that were affected by this and lost their money by this. And it wasn't just, the exchange and Alameda and all of these things that were affected. It was other companies that we found out were entrenched in this as well, and cryptocurrencies too, like Solana, that were really entrenched in this as well. And now it's like, oh gosh, what the heck happens going forward? But BlockFi went down because of this too. Granted, back in April, I believe they were already facing, going under, and
Mhm.
then this whole thing, Sam Bankman-Fried came in and made like a deal with BlockFi to kind of save them from going under. They took them under and or took them over and had the option to buy them out and whatnot. And so with them going down, BlockFi, of course, had to go ahead and file chapter 11 or whatever that is for major corporations that have to file bankruptcy. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of things there that are really setting the broader space back. And but I think the good thing that came out of it is that a lot of people are becoming less trusting of these exchanges, and I think that's a good
Mhm.
thing. A lot of
Yes.
people are learning, like
Mhm.
what not to trust. I mean, the
Mhm.
new thing for the broader crypto space is to reiterate the old term, not your keys, not your crypto, which we don't really, you know, get
Mhm.
so much in the BSV community, but that term is being tossed around a lot more so now, more than ever, in the
Mhm.
broader crypto space, which can be a good thing too.
Mhm.
Um, Spreading
Sure.
that knowledge and information. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, if you're going to hold whatever coin, you might as well understand the basics of it and how you can be your own custodian and that sort of thing. And then, I think it also really highlights the individual, right? A lot of people that come into this space, I was talking with some people in spaces the other day,
Mm.
about how they were so annoyed and upset about the whole aspect of this whole thing, right? And I was like, well, when all of a sudden do we stop blaming them, SBF and Alameda and all these people? When do we stop blaming them and stop blaming YouTubers and start placing the blame at some of these individuals' feet, right? I understand that they got wrecked. I feel bad for them. I'm sorry for them. I'm sorry for their losses, and I hope that this teaches them a very valuable lesson about not only controlling their own things, but understanding what they're actually working with. And but here's the thing: when bull markets happen, everybody seems like your bank teller, your dad, your cousin's wife, or whoever is talking about this new thing called cryptocurrency and how Dogecoin just made them $10,000 and how they've invested in this safe moon project and they've made 50 grand, and all of a sudden you're investing in all these shitty ass projects and you don't even know what this project's about, but because you heard your bank teller talking about it, now you want to be a part of it. And you're listening to everybody without doing your own research into the projects yourself or understanding what the consequences of allowing somebody else to control your assets, what the implications of that could be. And so I think a lot of the blame also has to be placed at the feet of everybody who decided to give them their money and their assets. It's like,
Mhm.
had you not done that, had you not been telling your cousins and your brothers and your sisters about this safe way to store your money, they couldn't have done anything. They wouldn't have lost all this. I mean,
Mhm. Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
hype. Following the
yeah,
hype.
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that amazes me is that I feel like, you know, I've been a pretty consistent person over my life. And with my relationships, I've gone out and done amazing things and had integrity with what I do. And still, over the years, I had so many friends and family who just were totally uninterested in Bitcoin, as in the BSV blockchain. And they run to the hype, they run to the coin telegraphs, and they want to get the Bitcoin for Dummies book. And I feel like, why do they not have enough sense to look at the integrity of where they're getting their information? I guess they just think, oh, I'm going to go look at this hypey thing over here, or this is on TV, so I'm going to listen to that. I saw their commercial during the Super Bowl, so therefore, big ups to them. And meanwhile, you have people like yourself, like me, and many others who are just doing the peer-to-peer communication, and still it's like people are not very responsive to it at all. So I kind of think, wow, this uncle or that auntie, I tried to tell them multiple times, those are scams. Like, that's old school, just pump and dump stuff. There's no value in that. And they still want to go in and buy into it. So,
It's the new school Nigerian prince scams, right? That's how they get you now. It's through
yeah,
these pump and
exactly.
dumps.
Send us your money, send us $1, and we'll send you, you know, $100,000, right? That's what they say through those emails, or
Right.
they used to, right? So it is, you're right. People, we have to all take responsibility, I guess, for um, those investment choices. And, you know, one more thing about the CBDC and the future is that people will say, oh, we want to have control over our finances. And, you know, even today, um, I have to jump through many hoops to make a purchase. So, for example, I made an attempt to purchase a LinkedIn subscription, and it was blocked by my bank, even though I had completely paid the balance and I had very high credit availability. Still, the bank flagged it as potential fraud. So they didn't let it go through. So then I had to call them. And then after 4 or 5 phone calls, they said I need to come into the bank to verify my identity. So then I went into the bank. And then finally, after jumping through all of these hoops, I was able to purchase my LinkedIn recruiter subscription. And I thought, you know, this is a great example of how already we don't have full control. So to say that it's the CBDCs that will take away our control is kind of bogus. I think that the fact that the banks, because they have to spend so much on fraud protection, anti-fraud, that they do the least for the customer. They
Mm.
say, oh, we're protecting you, when really they're just um, you know, being irritating. They're not smooth. They're not giving me the ability to quickly make a purchase for my business. You know, they're really giving me a lot of pushback that takes a lot of time to get through, and they mask it like they're protecting us, and that is something that innovation can improve. So we're going to keep going day by day, slippery slope with the good stuff, y'all.
Sounds good.
Yes. And Brittany, thank you so much for your time today. I know you have another meeting here shortly. So how can people follow you?
You can find me on YouTube at Brittany Bits Podcast, or on Twitter at Brittany Bits with a
Fabulous.
Z.
Brittany Bits with a Z. And she is the leading reporter on Bitcoin and crypto. She has interviewed all of the top business makers in the Bitcoin scene, and as well as the major or larger cryptocurrency scene. So Brittany is a go-to for information on this economy and innovation and really just everything. So follow her, and welcome to be in the moment with us again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rory.
Yay.